Hey Nines, welcome back to term 4 of English. I'm really excited for this term, and in today's video I wanted just to give you guys a little bit of a context and introduction to our central text study for English this term, which is stand up. So before we do anything, I just want to know what you guys remember about stand up. Now that was the episode from the Redfern Now series that we watched before the holidays. If you may recall, that was the episode where we had our central protagonist. So our main character was Joel Shields. He was a 16-year-old Indigenous student at Clifton Grammar, and he refuses to stand up and sing the national anthem. So what I'd like to do is just get an idea of what you remember about stand up. So I want you to spend 10 minutes on this little ABC brainstorm activity. So we've done a couple of ABC brainstorms before, and it's a really effective way just to rejig our memory. So the rules are pretty simple. In your workbook, I want you to handwrite and make a box for each letter in the alphabet, so all the way from A to Z. And secondly, I want you to brainstorm a word or a phrase that starts with each letter of the alphabet. This word or phrase must be related to stand up. So for example, the letter A, a word that's related to stand up might be Aboriginal. So we know that Joel and his family, particularly his father, are proud Aboriginals. B might be for bravery, because Joel shows bravery when he stands up for his own views and values and also refuses to stand and sing the national anthem. And C might be for conformity, because Joel refuses to conform or follow the restrictive traditions of Clifton Grammar. So I want you to spend 10 minutes to do a little bit of an ABC brainstorm, and in tomorrow morning's lesson, so on Tuesday, we're going to share a couple of the words that we came up with in this brainstorm. So you can pause this video and have a go at the brainstorm now. Once you finish your brainstorm, you can resume playing this video. Okay, so hopefully your brainstorms went well. For the rest of this slideshow or this video, I just want to give you guys a little bit of background on stand up, the setting of Redfern, and I just want to give you guys a little bit of a background on the Australian national anthem as well. We'll start off with some general details. So we know stand up is an episode from the Australian drama TV series called Redfern Now. Each episode in the series, Redfern Now, provides insight into the contemporary issues facing Aboriginal Australians. So what I mean by contemporary, it's another word for modern. So each episode in Redfern Now introduces new characters, new settings, but they all have a common thread, and that's an exploration of the modern issues that Aboriginal Australians face in their everyday lives. So obviously in our episode Stand Up, the big issue was the Australian national anthem and how sort of racist and restrictive traditions are forced upon young Indigenous people. But in Redfern Now, other episodes deal with the impacts of the stolen generation, lack of employment, even mental health issues that are impacting the Aboriginal community, and also the consequences of colonisation. If you've got a little bit of extra time and you're interested, if you go on ClickView and search Redfern Now, all of the episodes in the series are actually free for you to watch. So our episode, Stand Up, aired on November 22nd, 2012 on ABC, and it's directed by Rachel Perkins. So every time you see this little sort of blue pencil GIF, I would recommend writing down some notes. So I'd recommend just spending a minute or two just copying down some of these general notes, because they will come in handy as the unit progresses and we have to write about and analyse this episode. So the episode Stand Up is set in the inner city suburb in Sydney called Redfern. And Redfern's a really important suburb and community because it holds a lot of significance for the Aboriginal people. We're going to talk a little bit about Redfern and the significance of the setting in a later video, but essentially it has been the site of lots of Aboriginal activism for many decades, and probably most famously in 1992 our Australian Prime Minister back then was named Paul Keating, and he delivered the iconic Redfern speech in Redfern. So it marked the first ever time that any sort of politician in Australia publicly acknowledged the dispossession of Aboriginal people and the need for reconciliation. And I know a lot of you guys might have learned a little bit about the stolen generations, so you may have watched or read the transcript of the Redfern speech, or you may have some prior knowledge about it. But that's why Redfern is such a significant part of Australian history, and it's why it's such an important location for Aboriginal Australians. Okay, so we know that Stand Up is very much a text that deals with the Australian National Anthem. So in the middle there, I've taken a screenshot from the episode where Joel refuses to stand and sing the National Anthem. And we know that through our study of To Kill a Mockingbird, but also just sort of our own prior knowledge, national anthems across the world are quite controversial. On the top left-hand corner, you've got the New South Wales rugby team. A couple of years ago, they actually refused to sing the national anthem out of protest for the injustices that the Aboriginal community have faced. Bottom left-hand corner there, if you're an NFL or American football fan, you might have heard of the player Colin Kaepernick. His career was essentially terminated because he refused to sing the American national anthem as a protest for Black Lives Matter and against police brutality, and he took a kneel. So he kneeled down to take a stand against African American injustices in his specific field. Top right-hand corner is a Brisbane schoolgirl. Her name is Harper Nielsen. In 2018, she caused national controversy because she refused to sing the national anthem at a school assembly because she believed that it promoted institutionalized racism. So very similar to what Joel does in Stand Up. And bottom right-hand corner was actually from last year. So here you've got Richmond and Collingwood AFL players taking a knee in protest for the Black Lives Matter movement, or in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, which obviously took the world by storm and was really prominent last year. So the point is, refusing to sing national anthems is not just something that is isolated to Australia, it's actually worldwide, and there are a number of reasons why multiple members of the community have protested against national anthems in the past. So this is Advance Australia Fair, and it's probably what you guys are most familiar with. In general, we really only sing the first sort of verse of this national anthem. So Australians, let us all rejoice, for we are young and free. I've highlighted for we are young and free because that lyric has been changed, which we'll talk about a little bit later. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea, our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing Advance Australia Fair. So I think you guys would all be quite familiar with this because we've sung it at assemblies, we sing it at really important events. But it is problematic, and I would encourage you to think, maybe you have some knowledge about this, maybe you've read about this or you've heard about this. Our national anthem is really controversial, and for Aboriginal Australians it does raise a lot of problematic areas, problematic issues. And I'd encourage you to think, perhaps you can pause the video here if you wish, why is this first part of our national anthem, the one that we're most used to singing, so controversial? So here's a little bit of a history of the Australian National Anthem. It was actually composed in 1878 by Peter Dodds McCormick. Original lyrics include, when gallant cook from Albion sailed to trace wide oceans over, true British courage bore him on till he landed on our shore. Should foreign foe ever sight our coast or dare a foot to land, we'll rouse to arms like sires of yore to guard our native strand. So again, it's obviously quite powerful and it's quite impactful, but I would encourage you to think, what about these original lyrics is problematic, especially if you take on the perspective of an Aboriginal Australian. Why is this problematic? And what about the language in these lyrics might be a little bit controversial? So again, feel free to pause the video here and read it again. But I'd love to discuss this in our next Zoom lesson. Why are the original lyrics so controversial? So a little bit of a timeline here. In 1974, the government ran a national survey and it surveyed 60,000 Australians, and Advance Australia Fair received 51% of the nation's votes, and it beat out other iconic songs like Waltzing Matilda and Song of Australia to become a national anthem. But in 1976, God Save the Queen was reinstated as our anthem. So God Save the Queen is obviously the anthem of the United Kingdom. In 1977, another poll again finds that Advance Australia Fair is the preferred anthem. And again, in 1984, Advance Australia Fair is officially made the national anthem again. McCormick's lyrics are cut down and edited into the original or the new version that we know today. That's the version that we sing at assemblies and other big events across the nation. So this is why Mr. Parrish in Stand Up says this quote: "The bloody song only became the national anthem in 1984. Look at the kids, it means nothing to them." So the national anthem really only became official 3 decades ago. So perhaps that's why he believes it doesn't really hold much meaning to the students at Clifton Grammar in Stand Up. And I would throw it over to you guys as well. So Year 9s, does the national anthem or the lyrics in the anthem hold any significance or meaning to you? So a little bit of food for thought. Now, as we've talked about and as the episode Stand Up explores, the lyrics in the Australian national anthem are a little bit controversial, and they, I guess, allude to the checkered past of Australian history. I'm going to unpack a couple of lyrics from the national anthem, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why they might be controversial. Probably the most controversial lyric in our anthem is "Australians, let us all rejoice, for we are young and free." So by referring to Australia's young history, that essentially ignores and denies the fact that Aboriginal Australians have been here for 65,000 years. This lyric is also controversial because it perpetuates the idea of terra nullius. So for any students here who do a legal studies unit or have chosen a legal studies elective or maybe the VC subject in Year 10 next year, you'll learn a little bit about terra nullius. But that's the idea that Australia was nobody's land before the Europeans settled it, which is obviously quite controversial because Aboriginal Australians have occupied and lived and cultivated our land for over 65,000 years before the Europeans settled. This lyric is also really controversial because a lot of members of the Indigenous community would say that this ignores the inequalities and inequities that they have suffered, such as limited access to education and healthcare, lower life expectancy, and also disproportionate incarceration rates. If you're interested, and if you just Google the statistics and the data around how many Aboriginal Australians are in prison, then it is quite a sobering statistic, unfortunately. Advance Australia Fair, so the title of our anthem, but also a lyric in our anthem, is also a really controversial lyric. It's controversial because the repetition of the word fair in our national anthem, which could be interpreted to mean beautiful, or just, or justice, or white, as in fair-skinned, it celebrates European colonisation and the genocide of much of the Indigenous population and white superiority. So again, the word fair has a really, problematic racial connotation. And another reason why it's so controversial is the national anthem contains language from the White Australia policy, or the era in which this policy was enacted. Another reason why a lot of Indigenous Australians or Aboriginal Australians have called out this lyric is because it downplays the grave injustices that destroyed many Indigenous lives and communities, such as the stolen generations, which I know you guys have learnt about in humanities in the past. Again, there are so many injustices that have ravaged the Aboriginal community, and the idea of fairness doesn't really marry up with the reality of the history. So again, these are reasons why the Australian National Anthem are really, really problematic. I want to end on this slide today, and I want to leave you guys with some, food for thought. So on New Year's Eve 2020, So not too long ago, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison came out and he announced a change to the lyrics in the national anthem from "We are young and free" to "We are one and free." Now, this was seen as, a little bit of a symbolic gesture and, extending the olive branch for reconciliation. Ken Wyatt, who's the Minister for Indigenous Australians, called this real reconciliation and said that the word one demonstrated, quote, in blue there, the hope of Australia, the Australian dream, that opportunity is not defined by skin colour or postcode, but by grit, endeavour and a commitment to achieve. One signals our genuine commitment to ensure that no Australian is left behind. Now, spoiler alert, this was met with a bit of controversy because a lot of Aboriginal Australians were saying, does changing literally one word in our Australian national anthem solve the injustices that have plagued our community in the past and also continue to plague our community today? Does it make up for the fact that for hundreds of years we have been discriminated against? So I want to throw it over to you guys. What are your thoughts? And we can have a bit of a discussion about this in our next Zoom lesson on Tuesday morning. But what are your thoughts? Does this change to the national anthem or the lyrics of the national anthem, I guess, symbolize real reconciliation and a real, genuine attempt to sort of reconcile the issues of the past with our Aboriginal community? Or is it, again, just a symbolic gesture that doesn't really mean much? All right. So, Year 9s, I know this was a bit of a long video, but I hope it's giving you guys a little bit of background on the key issues and the key ideas that are explored in Stand Up. What I'd love for you guys to do is a 3, 2, 1 for me. So on the Google Classroom post in which this video was linked, I want you to write down 3 things in the exercise book from today's lessons, from today's lesson that you learned, 2 things that you found interesting or would like to know a little bit more about, and 1 question that you might have about today's content. And I'll be more than happy to answer those questions in our next Zoom lesson as well. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you found it informative. Welcome back to Term 4, Year 9s. I'm really excited for the term ahead. Let's end the year on a positive note, and I look forward to catching up with the class on Zoom on Tuesday morning. All right, see you then. Bye-bye.